Hi, this is Patrick Coffin. I'm going to put a lot of information all in one place here on the postponement of the beatification of Archbishop Fulton Sheen, because I don't think you have the full story if it's just snippets you've been reading on the internet and so on. In this video, I want to provide some context for the lead up to the beatification, which had been slated by the Holy See for December 21st, 2019, and give you some background on why it was halted and by whom, what the official story is, as well as, first of all, say some things about Bishop Sheen himself and why he's not exactly the kind of prelate that Pope Francis likes to honor. And this is where we can find a bright silver lining in an otherwise dark cloud. Through this snub of a postponement, Bishop Sheen is still purifying the church and her people, the people he gave his life for. More on that purification in a few minutes. Who was Fulton J. Sheen? He was born in 1895 in El Paso, Illinois, was ordained to the priesthood in 1919, born and raised in Peoria. You could almost call Bishop Sheen a prodigy because his intellectual brilliance was discovered early on, and he was sent after ordination to the Catholic University of Louvain in Belgium to do a doctorate, which is now published as God and Intelligence, featuring a foreword by his longtime friend G.K. Chesterton. For that doctorate, he was awarded the prestigious Cardinal Mercier Prize for Academic Excellence. For over 20 years, he taught philosophy at the Catholic University of America and hosted a weekly radio show on NBC from 1930 to 1950 called The Catholic Hour. Monsignor Sheen was consecrated Auxiliary Bishop of New York in 1951, and within a year was asked to host an off-hours, almost experimental broadcast on the small Dumont network in New York, which became his signature TV show, Life is Worth Living. Sheen wrote over 60 books, he won 2 Emmy Awards, and made the cover of Time magazine. It's safe to say that in his day, Bishop Sheen was a household name. But he also had a reputation, even during his life, for personal holiness and goodness. He died 2 months after he got to meet and embrace his longtime hero, St. John Paul II, in a touching moment in St. Patrick's Cathedral that flooded the church with tears when they embraced in the sanctuary. His cause for canonization was opened in 2002, and he was subsequently named Servant of God and then Venerable Fulton Sheen, which means that his virtues were heroic and he could be imitated by Christians around the world because of those virtues. Every aspect of his very public life has undergone extraordinary scrutiny already. The miraculous raising of the dead from, in the case of young James Fulton Engstrom, is a certified bona fide miracle. You can see my interview with his mom, Bonnie, in the link below. And finally, Pope Francis himself authorized Bishop Sheen as worthy of beatification. Full stop. But what about the Sheen Cause Pause? Well, the Diocese of Rochester confirmed last Thursday that it had requested a delay of beatification of Bishop Sheen, which had been scheduled, as I mentioned, for December 21st, until it was postponed indefinitely earlier this week. Now, the Diocese of Peoria says the Rochester Diocese has left out key facts as to why and what happened. Sources told Catholic News Agency that Rochester Archbishop Salvatore Matano was, quote, especially concerned that the New York Attorney General could time the release of an announcement concerning Sheen to coincide with the beatification, potentially marring the celebration with allegations of scandal, unquote. When you first hear this, it sounds reasonable, right? But it's not reasonable when you know the facts behind the story. Here's why. The Rochester Diocese said in a statement December 5th, a person's cause for beatification must entail a review of the person's entire life. In this regard, the Diocese of Rochester has considered the tenure of Archbishop Sheen as the Bishop of Rochester, unquote. Now, what's this a reference to? It's in reference to Sheen's alleged role in priests' assignments. Sounds ominous, right? Well, like the case against Cardinal Pell, here is where the suspicions against Bishop Sheen fall apart. It goes on, quote, the Diocese of Rochester did its due diligence in the matter and believed that, while not casting suspicion, give us a break, of course it's casting suspicion, it was prudent that Archbishop Sheen's cause receive further study and deliberation, while also acknowledging the competency of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints to render its decision. The Holy See ultimately decided to postpone the beatification, unquote. I'm sorry, but the best way to describe this is weaselly. This, at best, is a half-truth. The Archdiocese of Rochester already raised these objections long before the date set by the Holy See on November 18, 2019. These same concerns were raised again, this time, according to the Diocese of Peoria's press release, with the help of, quote, a few members of the Bishops' Conference, unquote, who went, of course, unnamed, with the exception of the Bishop of Rochester. It turns out that the cryptic allusion to his tenure in Rochester relates to a bogus accusation that Bishop Sheen placed children in danger by assigning a pervert predator named Father Gerald Gooley to a parish in Rochester, knowing he was a predator. Again, the Diocese of Peoria, working with the Congregation for the Causes of Saints in Rome, examined this case in minute detail. None of it's true. According to the Catholic Herald UK, Gooley was ordained in 1956, and from 63 to 1967 he served in parishes in West Virginia. According to a document issued by the Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston there in 1963, the Diocese of Rochester received an allegation that in 1960, Gooley committed abuse or misconduct against adults, not minors. I'm not minimizing it, but he wasn't a pedophile priest. The CNA reports that this priest returned from Wheeling to help his sick parents in Rochester in 1967. That's the year after Sheen became Rochester's ordinary in October 1966. The allegation is that Sheen gave Gooley an assignment in the diocese despite a 1963 allegation that I mentioned against him. And now the current bishop there, Bishop Matano, is nervous that the New York Attorney General might mention Bishop Sheen in some future damning report like the horrifying PA grand jury report. Remember that from the Summer of Shame last year? I can understand why Bishop Matano is nervous about civil authorities and church credibility, since his diocese filed for bankruptcy in September. But the optics here are terrible. Caving to the fear of something that might or might not happen suggests that the church's own internal procedures and powers of investigation are somehow faulty, and that we Catholics have to wait for Caesar to get to the bottom of it. And that is a very dangerous precedent because it undermines people's faith in the church's competence to vet her own candidates for sainthood. And honestly, who cares if Bishop Sheen appears in some AG report? That would only cast more attention on the man himself and his legacy once the truth gets out, and more hearts and minds would be exposed to his magnificent teachings. The point is, Fulton J. Sheen is clean. The officials at the Diocese of Peoria have confirmed that Sheen never assigned Gooley to ministry. Monsignor James Cruz of the Peoria Diocese told Catholic News Agency, and this is a direct quote, "We have studied extensively Sheen's administrative decisions regarding Gooley, and he never put children in harm's way." He goes on, "In talking with Gooley, assignments that some say Sheen gave him, Gooley says, 'I never served there.'" Finally, where is Timothy Cardinal Dolan of New York in all this? Cardinal Dolan's been strangely silent for something so striking and newsworthy happening in one of his own suffragan dioceses. Does the silence have something, maybe, possibly something to do with the fact that he lost 4 different legal appeals in a row, costing the faithful of New York hundreds of thousands of dollars for high-priced attorneys to keep Bishop Sheen's body in St. Pat's Cathedral? Indeed, why haven't Cardinal Dolan or Cardinal Supich or Cardinal Tobin or Bishop McElroy or Bishop Barron or Cardinal Farrell made any kind of statement in defense of their fellow American brother bishop, Fulton J. Sheen? And think about this. If the real concern here has to do with Sheen's name showing up in an AG report involving cases that have already been raised and resolved, why were Roger Cardinal Mahoney and Donald Cardinal Wuerl given places of honor at the recent installation mass of Archbishop Wilton Gregory, Wuerl's successor in Washington, D.C.? It's a matter of public record that Cardinal Mahoney moved several pedophiles, and yes, pedophiles, in Roman collars around Los Angeles over the years. Let's go one step further. Cardinal Wuerl's name is mentioned over 200 times in the existent PA grand jury report as having failed to protect children time and time again. In fact, the outrage from the faithful led to Wuerl's name being removed as the title of North Catholic High School in the Pittsburgh Diocese. And there he was, an honored part of the procession installation mass, given a seat of honor in the sanctuary. And crickets. No one complains. But we have to bring Bishop Sheen's canonization cause to a screeching halt because of a false fear of a bogus allegation against a famously holy bishop who's not around to defend himself. The fact that Rome only gave the Diocese of Peoria 5 weeks to get a beatification ceremony properly promoted and organized, 4 days before Christmas, was already a major snub against Bishop Sheen. But not just him, it's against the dynamic traditional orthodoxy that he represents. In the end, I'm glad the cause was halted. I really am. Why? Why? After all I just said. Because I don't think the higher-ups in Rome were properly disposed to go through with the ceremony with a straight face anyway, since Bishop Sheen represents exactly the kind of prelate who is targeted for opprobrium on a regular basis by Pope Francis himself. It's just the truth. You'd think the most popular bishop in U.S. history would have been a natural leader for Pope Francis to mention during his speech to Congress in 2015. But no, whoever wrote that speech did find time to mention the tragic figure of monk writer Thomas Merton and activist Dorothy Day, foundress of the Catholic Worker, who was at least a servant of God. You might also be unaware that the man deputized by Pope Francis to beatify Bishop Sheen in the first place was the new prefect of the Congregation for Saints, Cardinal Angelo Bieciu, who is spending a lot of time in the press now denying that he had anything to do with the multi-million-dollar IOR, or Vatican Bank loan, to the corrupt hospital in Rome called IDI. And guess who objected to this financial operation and was soon removed suddenly from Rome? George Cardinal Pell. That's who. Cardinal Pell, who sits now in a Melbourne jail for a crime he did not commit. The perfect scapegoat. So, as in his life, so in his death, Bishop Sheen is still purifying the church, still bringing people to Christ. I believe that devotion to Bishop Sheen will only intensify and spread in the wake of this Vatican misstep, thanks to a few unnamed members of the USCCB. Venerable Fulton J. Sheen, Ora Pro Nobis. I'm Patrick Coffin. Subscribe to this channel. Don't miss a thing. I load up new commentary each weekend. And join Coffin Nation. CoffinNation.com is the place to sign up for the largest culture-restoring community in the world, now in 25 countries. Stick around. Leave your comments below. And be a saint. What else is there?